One of the world's most famous wonders might never have existed. We are talking about the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a marvel of tiered greenery said to have risen from the desert sands. By the end of this journey, you will understand the profound secrets behind this ancient enigma, separating romantic legend from historical possibility. We will investigate why contemporary Babylonian texts ignore it entirely, and how a rival city hundreds of miles away presents a shocking alternative. What does it truly mean to build a paradise in an unforgiving land? Our story truly begins not in Babylon, but in the libraries of ancient Greece. Centuries after the city's peak, a handful of historians began to write about a wonder they had never seen. The earliest known mention comes from a Babylonian priest named Berossus, who wrote in Greek around 280 years before the Common Era. He described a king building elevated stone terraces planted with all kinds of trees to please his queen, a Median princess who missed the green mountains of her homeland. This romantic origin story, passed down, became the seed of the legend. The most detailed accounts come later from Greek and Roman writers like Diodorus, Siculus, and Strabo, working in the 1st century before the Common Era. Their descriptions are astonishingly vivid. They speak of a square structure, each side nearly 400 feet long, rising in tier upon tier like a stepped pyramid. The terraces, they claimed, were supported not by mud brick, Babylon's primary building material, but by massive stone slabs. Upon these levels, soil was packed deep enough to grow full-sized trees. They wrote of fragrant flowers, shaded walkways, and a complex hidden irrigation system. Strabo even described a screw mechanism, a great Archimedes screw, that lifted water from the Euphrates River to the very top, allowing it to cascade down through the gardens in a perpetual, life-giving cycle. These are the images that have captivated the world for 2 millennia, yet here we encounter the first and greatest crack in the foundation of this story. While these Greek sources wrote with certainty, the contemporary records from Babylon itself are utterly, bafflingly silent. We have thousands of clay tablets from the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II, the ruler most often credited with building the gardens. These tablets are meticulous. They record everything from the wages paid to construction workers and the delivery of dates and grain, to the precise prayers offered at temple ceremonies. They detail the building of Babylon's walls, its grand processional street, and the immense Ishtar Gate. But in all this vast administrative and religious documentation, there is not a single word, not a hint, about constructing a monumental garden wonder, an engineering project that would have been staggeringly complex and expensive. This silence is deafening. It creates the core historical mystery. Why would the Babylonians, who are proud record keepers, omit their greatest achievement? It is as if we had detailed blueprints and payroll records for the construction of a medieval cathedral, but no mention of its stained glass windows or its spire. The disconnect forces a difficult question. Were the Greek historians describing a real place they had only heard about in tales, perhaps embellishing a kernel of truth? Or were they, centuries removed, weaving a traveler's fantasy of an impossible Eastern paradise? The answer may lie not in what they wrote, but in where they might have actually been looking. This romantic tale centers on a king and a queen, a story of love built to defy geography. King Nebuchadnezzar II was one of the most powerful rulers of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, reigning in the 6th century before the Common Era. His ambition was carved in stone and baked in brick. The historical record shows he transformed Babylon into a metropolis of unimaginable splendor. He rebuilt the great ziggurat Etemenanke, which some believe inspired the biblical Tower of Babel. He constructed that iconic blue Ishtar Gate, adorned with glazed bricks depicting dragons and bulls. He paved the city's main processional way with limestone slabs. This was a ruler who thought on a monumental scale, whose very identity was tied to grand construction. So, the idea that he would commission the ultimate luxury, a mountain of gardens in the flat river plain, fits his profile perfectly. The queen in this story is Amytis, said to be a princess from the land of Media in the rugged, green highlands of what is now northwestern Iran. The story passed down by later historians is poignant. She was married to Nebuchadnezzar for political alliance, but she grew deeply homesick. The flat, dusty landscape of Babylon under its relentless sun was a prison of yellow and brown. She longed for the forested slopes and cool breezes of her mountainous homeland. To cure her melancholy and prove his devotion, the king decided to build a replica of her lost paradise. He would create a green, flowering mountain where none existed. He would quite literally move heaven and earth to make her smile. It is a powerful narrative, one that transforms an engineering project into a gesture of profound love. We can almost see it, a royal couple walking shaded paths high above the city, the scent of blossoms in the air, a personal Eden built against all odds. But we must scrutinize this beautiful story with the same rigor we apply to the bricks of Babylon. While Queen Amytis is attested in some records, likely as Nebuchadnezzar's wife, the specific link between her and the gardens is entirely absent from contemporary Babylonian texts. Those meticulous clay tablets that detail the king's building campaigns are silent on this motive. They do not say, "The king, to gladden the heart of Amytis, ordered the planting of a great garden." Her homesickness is a detail added centuries later by writers weaving a moral and romantic tale. This does not mean the gardens could not have been built for a queen, but it strips the story of its specific emotional engine. It becomes a likely invention, a poetic explanation crafted by later cultures to answer the simple human question, why would anyone build such a thing? The answer, for love, is always more compelling than for political prestige or to demonstrate divine favor, so we are left with a haunting possibility. The most enduring human story attached to the Hanging Gardens, the very heart of its legend, may itself be a beautiful fiction, a layer of myth applied to a mystery that was already ancient. But if not in Babylon, then where? A radical answer emerged from the study of ancient cuneiform tablets, one that points the finger at a different king in a different empire a full century before Nebuchadnezzar. This is the work of Dr. Stephanie Daly, an Oxford scholar who spent years piecing together a controversial new narrative. Her conclusion is startling. She proposes that the Hanging Gardens were real, but they were never in Babylon at all. They were built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib in his capital city of Nineveh. The evidence begins with Sennacherib's own words. In royal inscriptions from around 700 years before the Common Era, he boasts of creating a magnificent garden, a wonder for all peoples, beside his grand palace. He describes an incredible feat of engineering to water it. He built a system of canals and aqueducts to bring water from mountain sources over 30 miles away. Most strikingly, his text mentions the use of what he called a new type of screw made of bronze to lift vast quantities of water to great heights. This directly echoes the later Greek descriptions of the Archimedes screw used in the Hanging Gardens, a technology the Greeks mistakenly credited to their own era. Sennacherib also lists the exotic plants collected for this garden, from cotton and spices to trees from distant lands, creating a botanical collection that matched the legendary diversity of the Hanging Gardens. The implications of this theory are profound. It would mean that early Greek travelers and historians, hearing tales of an incredible Eastern garden, simply attached it to the most famous ruined city they knew, Babylon. Over centuries, the story migrated south. Dr. Daly's research suggests the gardens were an Assyrian masterpiece, a testament to Sennacherib's ruthless ambition and engineering genius. He wasn't building for a homesick queen, but to showcase his power over nature itself, to create a living monument to his own divinity and the reach of his empire. Visual evidence adds weight to the idea. Stone reliefs from Sennacherib's palace in Nineveh, now in the British Museum, depict a lush, terraced garden filled with trees, vines, and pavilions, climbing a hillside beside a water channel. It is a picture that matches the ancient descriptions far more closely than the flat, arid plain of Babylon ever could. If this theory is correct, it rewrites the history of one of the seven wonders, shifting its location nearly 300 miles to the north and reattributing its creation from the Babylonian Nebuchadnezzar to the Assyrian Sennacherib. It turns a romantic legend into a calculated display of imperial power. Yet even with this compelling alternative, the mystery only deepens. Why did the true location fade from memory? And how did a mistake of such magnitude become embedded in our history books for 2,000 years? The silence in Babylon's own records is matched by an equally profound silence in its soil. For over a century, archaeologists have scoured the ruins along the Euphrates, searching for any trace of the garden's legendary infrastructure. They have excavated the grand palace of Nebuchadnezzar, mapped its vast courtyards and throne rooms. They have studied the city's thick defensive walls. Yet nowhere have they uncovered the foundations for massive stone terraces, nor the remnants of a revolutionary irrigation system capable of watering full-sized trees in a desert climate. The soil of Babylon is primarily mud brick, which dissolves over millennia. Any sophisticated network of waterproofed stone channels and reservoirs would have left a distinct archaeological footprint, a ghostly blueprint in the earth. That footprint has never been found. The logistical challenge alone is staggering. To keep such a garden alive would have required thousands of gallons of water lifted from the river every single day against gravity in an era before mechanical pumps. While the Babylonians were brilliant hydraulic engineers for agriculture, the scale and vertical lift described by the Greek sources push the limits of ancient technology, especially in a city built almost entirely from baked mud. The very geography works against the traditional story. Babylon sits on a flat alluvial plain. Building a towering, artificial mountain of greenery, there would have been an act of supreme defiance against nature, requiring not just water, but an unimaginable amount of imported soil, stone, and labor, all for a purely aesthetic project. It feels to many scholars like building a ski resort in the middle of a desert, a spectacle so audacious it borders on the implausible. Now, shift the scene 300 miles to the north, to the ancient Assyrian capital of Nineveh. Here, the landscape tells a different story. The city was built on a series of rolling hills overlooking the Tigris River. The royal palace of Sennacherib was constructed on a high terrace, with natural slopes perfect for creating the tiered, hanging effect described in the legends. The topography itself invites a garden, but the real clincher is the water. Remember that bronze screw Sennacherib boasted about in his inscriptions. He was not exaggerating. His engineers built one of the ancient world's most ambitious water projects. At a place called Jerwan, they constructed a monumental limestone aqueduct, part of a 50-mile system designed to bring fresh mountain water directly to Nineveh. This was not just for drinking, it was for display, for power, and very likely for irrigation on a grand scale. The Jerwan aqueduct stands today as a ruin, a silent testament to an engineering prowess that matches and even exceeds the requirements for the hanging gardens. It proves that Sennacherib had the means, the motive, and the perfect canvas. He was a king obsessed with monumental building and technological showmanship, who wanted to create a paradise garden as a symbol of his empire's reach and his own divine favor. A stone relief from his palace shows just such a garden, with trees growing on ascending terraces, watered by an aqueduct. It is a picture that fits the ancient descriptions with an almost eerie precision. So we are left with two suspects: Babylon, the famous city with the compelling love story but no physical evidence, and Nineveh, the less famous but technologically superior power with the engineering, the topography, and the king's own words to back it up. The detective's notebook is filling up, and the clues are pointing in a startling new direction. If the garden was in Nineveh, then how did its name and fame become so completely entangled with its southern rival? The answer lies not in stone or clay, but in the fog of war and the fragility of human memory. To build a paradise, you must first conquer gravity. The single greatest challenge facing the engineers of a hanging garden would not have been the plants or even the water, but the immense sodden weight of the entire structure. Picture a modern rooftop garden, but magnified 100-fold, built not on reinforced concrete but on the technology of the Iron Age. The soil needed to support full-sized trees is not a light layer of potting mix, it is a deep, heavy, waterlogged mass. On a flat plain like Babylon, or even on the terraced hills of Nineveh, constructing tiered platforms to hold this weight without catastrophic collapse would require a revolutionary approach to support. The solution, according to the ancient descriptions and modern engineering analysis, likely lay in a sophisticated use of arches and vaults. While the Babylonians were masters of mud brick construction, for truly heavy lifting they turned to stone. And the architectural key was the vault, a continuous arch forming a ceiling or a supporting roof. Imagine a long, tunnel-like space built entirely of interlocking bricks or stones, shaped like a half-cylinder. This structure is incredibly strong because it distributes the downward force of whatever is above it outward along its curved sides, channeling the weight into sturdy supporting walls. Now imagine not just one vault, but a whole honeycomb of them, built side by side and stacked atop one another. This creates a massive, multi-level underground foundation, a hidden artificial hill made of stone and empty space. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus hinted at this very design, describing a foundation of stone slabs set with bitumen and lead to protect against moisture with vaulted chambers beneath. These chambers would have served a critical dual purpose. First, they created the elevated base, the artificial mountain upon which the garden tiers could be built. Second, the hollow spaces within the vaults allowed for crucial drainage and even housed the machinery for the water lifting systems. Water seeping down through the deep soil above could drain into these chambers and be channeled away, preventing the entire structure from becoming a waterlogged, unstable mud pile that would simply sink under its own weight. The Assyrians, under kings like Sennacherib, took this stone architecture to an even higher level of sophistication. Their palaces at Nineveh and Khorsabad featured vast, vaulted halls and complex systems of underground canals and drainage. They were not just building rooms, they were sculpting the very earth with stone to manage water and weight on a monumental scale. This expertise makes the idea of a massive, vault-supported garden foundation in Nineveh not just plausible, but a logical extension of their known architectural prowess. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a modern parking garage supporting a city park. The vaults are the hidden concrete levels that bear the load, while the soil and trees above are the green space everyone enjoys. This hidden skeleton of stone would have been the garden's true wonder, the unsung hero that made the visible miracle possible. Without this genius of subterranean engineering, the hanging gardens would have been an impossible dream, a vision that collapsed into the mud before the first tree could take root. But creating a stable foundation was only half the battle. The other, even more demanding challenge was delivering life itself to the very top of this stone mountain, a task that required defying the flow of rivers and the pull of the earth itself. The water had to climb. This was the heart of the miracle, the relentless demand that defined the gardens as either a fantasy or a masterpiece. To keep an artificial mountain of soil and roots from becoming a desert tomb, a constant, massive river of water had to be lifted from its source to the very pinnacle, day after day, year after year. Some ancient accounts suggest this lift could have been over 75 feet high, the equivalent of raising a column of water past a 7-story building. How could an ancient civilization without electric pumps or modern hydraulics possibly achieve such a feat? The most basic tool at their disposal was the shaduf, a simple but effective device still used in some parts of the world today. Picture a long wooden pole balanced like a seesaw on an upright frame. From one end hangs a bucket and from the other a heavy counterweight of clay or stone. A worker pulls the bucket down into the river or a canal, fills it, and then lets the counterweight do most of the work to lift it back up. He then swings the pole around to pour the water into an irrigation channel. It is a testament to human ingenuity, a way to multiply muscle power. But for a project on the scale of the Hanging Gardens, the shaduf has a fatal limitation. It is agonizingly slow and labor-intensive. To water an entire terraced ecosystem, you would need a veritable army of workers operating hundreds of these devices in a continuous, exhausting cycle. The logistics become a nightmare. The water would need to be lifted in stages from one terrace channel to the next, with each transfer losing precious time and volume to evaporation and spillage. While a shaduf could technically do the job, it feels inadequate for a wonder meant to inspire awe, more suited to a village farm than a royal paradise. The descriptions from later historians hint at something more elegant, more automated. They speak of a screw. This is the famous Archimedes screw, a helical tube or a screw-shaped blade inside a cylinder. When the cylinder is tilted and its lower end placed in water, turning the screw by hand or by oxen lifts the water in a continuous spiral flow up to the top where it pours out. It is a remarkably efficient design, capable of moving large volumes with less physical strain than a bucket chain. There is, however, a chronological problem. The Greek inventor Archimedes lived in the 3rd century before the Common Era, while the gardens were attributed to a time centuries earlier. For a garden in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, this would be an anachronism, a technology out of time. But for a garden in Assyria under Sennacherib, the puzzle piece snaps into place. Remember his own royal inscription. He boasted of using a new type of screw made of bronze to raise water for his garden projects. This is not a later Greek historian making an assumption. It is the king himself, a century before Archimedes, claiming the innovation. It suggests the core technology of the screw was known and used in the ancient Near East long before the Greeks perfected and named it. Suddenly, the impossible lift becomes a documented engineering achievement. Then there is the noria, a massive water wheel. Picture a great wooden wheel with clay pots or wooden boxes attached around its rim. The current of the river itself, or animal power, turns the wheel, dipping the pots into the water at the bottom and lifting them to the top, where they automatically tip their contents into a high aqueduct. This is a machine that works almost on its own, a perpetual motion device powered by nature. The Assyrians were master hydrologists, and the combination of a bronze screw for high-pressure lifting and norias for bulk water movement from their long-distance aqueducts creates a plausible, even likely system. Imagine the scene at the garden's base. A channel from a grand aqueduct feeds a reservoir. From there, a series of great bronze screws turned by teams of oxen in a steady, rhythmic pace, groan as they push a relentless flow of water up to a high terrace conduit. The water then cascades down through channels, feeding smaller screws or simply flowing by gravity from level to level, creating cool streams and murmuring waterfalls that nourish every root before collecting in drains to be recirculated. It is a symphony of hydraulics, a network of moving water that would have been as much a spectacle as the greenery it sustained. The sound alone, the creak of wood, the splash of water, the lowing of oxen would have defined the space. This was not just gardening, it was a theatrical demonstration of a king's absolute command over the natural world. He did not just bring water, he orchestrated it. And if he could make water climb stone, what power could possibly defy him? Yet, even with this solved, the gardens held one final, devastating secret, a vulnerability written not in clay, but in the very nature of empires. Water at the summit was only the beginning of the challenge. From that high point, it had to be tamed, divided, and directed with exquisite precision to every single plant on every single terrace. This required a hidden vascular system, a network of channels and controls as carefully planned as the gardens themselves. The primary arteries were likely shallow, open channels lined with baked clay bricks or even carved directly into stone, snaking along the edges of each terrace. From these main channels, smaller offshoots like capillaries would branch off to deliver moisture to specific rows of trees or flower beds. The control of this flow was critical. Too much water would drown roots and erode the precious soil. Too little would mean a slow death. This is where simple technology became genius. At key junctions, workers would have used wooden or bronze sluice gates, essentially small doors that could be raised or lowered to block or allow the passage of water. By adjusting these gates, gardeners could direct the life-giving flow exactly where it was needed, perhaps flooding a rice paddy on one level while providing a gentle trickle to a bed of herbs on another. The water itself would have been in constant, graceful motion. It might cascade from one terrace to the next over a small stone weir, creating a soothing murmur and cooling the air before being collected in a trough and channeled onward. This wasn't just irrigation, it was hydraulic choreography. But all this flowing water posed a grave danger to the very structure supporting it. Moisture is the eternal enemy of mud brick and even of porous stone. Left unchecked, constant seepage would have turned the foundation vaults into a soggy, crumbling ruin. The ancient builders knew this, and their solution was a masterclass in ancient waterproofing. According to texts, they employed a layered defense. First, against the bare brick or stone of the vaulted ceilings, they likely packed a thick layer of reeds and bitumen, a naturally occurring tar. This sticky, waterproof substance was the asphalt of the ancient world, used to caulk boats and seal baths. On top of this, for the most critical areas, they may have hammered thin sheets of lead. Lead is malleable, resistant to corrosion, and utterly impervious to water. Lining a channel or a reservoir with lead would guarantee not a drop escaped into the structure below. This constant, managed flow did more than just water plants. It created a self-sustaining microclimate. The evaporation from the soil and from all those channels and small waterfalls would have hung in the air, increasing humidity in the dry Mesopotamian heat. This moist air would have been cooler, a refuge from the desert sun, and it would have helped the plants themselves thrive by reducing water loss from their leaves. The sound of moving water would have masked the noises of the city below, creating an auditory oasis of peace, and critically, the perpetual movement prevented stagnation. Stagnant water in a deep soil bed would have suffocated roots, leading to rot and disease, but a system designed for constant through flow ensured the roots were oxygenated even as they were nourished. The garden, therefore, was not a static painting. It was a living, breathing engine powered by lifted river water, cooled by its own evaporation, and sustained by a hidden network of clay, metal, and human oversight. It was a triumph not of a single idea, but of 100 small solutions working in perfect, damp harmony. Yet this intricate, watery balance was terrifyingly fragile. It depended on a kingdom's full attention, on a steady supply of labor, and on the absolute authority of the king who commanded it all. What happens when that attention falters, when the empire turns its back, and the man who ordered the water to climb is no longer there to give the command? Yet the true soul of the garden was not in its stone or its water, but in what grew from it. What plants could possibly justify such an immense human effort? Ancient sources paint a picture of a tiered forest, a living tapestry woven from across the known world. They speak of towering cedars from the mountains of Lebanon, their fragrant wood prized by kings. They mention cypress trees, tall and dark, providing deep, structured shade. Date palms, the quintessential tree of Mesopotamia, would have offered both practical fruit and a familiar, rustling canopy. Between these great trees, a riot of color, with vines like grape and ivy cascading over terrace walls, and vibrant beds of roses, saffron crocus, and lilies scenting the air. This was not a simple orchard or a decorative courtyard. It was a deliberate collection of the world's botanical wonders. The challenge of creating this collection was as immense as the engineering. Each non-native species represented a perilous journey. Imagine the logistics of transporting a mature cedar tree, its root ball wrapped in damp cloth and matting, from the distant Lebanese highlands down to the river onto a barge and hundreds of miles across the plains. The tree would need constant care just to survive the trip, a precious and fragile cargo. Once planted, the real work began. A cedar evolved for cool, misty mountains would find the lowland heat oppressive, its needles browning without the precise humidity the garden's microclimate was designed to provide. Each plant was a hostage to human ingenuity, entirely dependent on the unseen network of channels and sluice gates. This transforms the garden from a romantic gesture into something more profound, a paradisos. That Persian word, meaning a walled park or pleasure ground, entered Greek as paradise. It was a symbol of absolute control and divine favor. A king who could make a cedar from Lebanon and a rose from Anatolia thrive side by side in the Assyrian or Babylonian sun was demonstrating more than wealth. He was showing mastery over nature itself. The garden was a living map of his empire's reach, a botanical trophy case. Every rare plant was a testament to far-off conquests or lucrative trade routes, its survival proof that the king's power could even suspend the laws of ecology. Visualize the contrast, the stark, sun-bleached desert stretching to the horizon, and within the palace walls, this impossible island of deep greens, cool shadows, and startling color. It was a sensory shock designed to awe any visitor into submission. Maintaining this fragile artificial ecosystem would have required a dedicated army of gardeners, not just laborers. These would have been early botanists and arborists, men with deep observational knowledge of each species' needs. They would move through the terraces, fingers testing soil moisture, eyes scanning leaves for signs of wilt or blight, constantly adjusting the flow of water to each section. A change in the wind or an unusually hot week would demand immediate adjustments to the entire water system. The garden was never finished. It was in a perpetual state of being saved, a dynamic equilibrium held in place by relentless human attention. This leads us to the garden's deepest vulnerability. Its existence was a performance that required an audience, a kingdom, and a king. What happens when the audience looks away when the kingdom falls and the royal command to keep the water flowing is silenced forever? But a garden built for love is a private fantasy, while a garden built for power is a public declaration. To understand the hanging gardens, we must see them not through our modern lens of romance, but through the ancient Near Eastern worldview of divine kingship. In this context, the gardens were a profound political symbol, a living, breathing monument to a king's absolute authority. They shouted a message to every visitor, foreign ambassador, and citizen. Look at what I can command. I have made the desert bloom. I have brought the mountain to the plain. I have ordered water to climb stone. The king was not merely a ruler, he was a provider and a creator, a human echo of the gods. This tradition of the royal garden as a symbol of control and prosperity stretches far back. Centuries before Babylon or Nineveh, Assyrian kings like Sennacherib II boasted of creating vast orchards and parks, importing exotic trees and digging canals to water them. He even held a 10-day feast for almost 70,000 guests to inaugurate his new gardens at Nimrud, a blatant display of abundance and patronage. These were not quiet retreats, they were engines of propaganda. The Persian Empire perfected this idea with their vast walled hunting parks, the paradisos, filled with both game and beautiful plants, demonstrating the king's mastery over both the wild and the cultivated world. The hanging gardens fit perfectly into this lineage. They were the ultimate expression of this ideology, pushed to its most spectacular extreme. By constructing an artificial, fertile mountain, the king was performing a godlike act. In Mesopotamian mythology, the gods created order from chaos. They separated the waters from the land and made life possible. A king who built a lush, watered paradise in the midst of a dry, chaotic landscape was mimicking that primordial act of creation. He was showing that his rule brought the same life-giving order to his empire. Every drop of water lifted, every foreign tree that thrived, was proof of his connection to divine forces and his technological might. The wealth required was itself a message. The labor of thousands, the bronze for screws, the lead for waterproofing, the stone transported from quarries, all this represented a staggering concentration of resources that only a supremely powerful state could muster. The garden was a luxury, yes, but a luxury so immense it became a tool of statecraft. It projected an image of invincible prosperity. How could a rival kingdom hope to challenge a ruler who could reshape geography itself for mere pleasure? The gardens also served a practical diplomatic function. Imagine an envoy from a distant forested land feeling superior in the flat Babylonian heat. He is led into the palace complex and then into this shaded, cool, green mountain. He sees trees from his own homeland thriving here but under the king's control. The message is subtle and devastating. Your treasures are now mine. Your nature obeys me. My power transcends borders, even ecological ones. This transforms the gardens from a static wonder into a dynamic instrument of rule. They were a theater of power where the king played the role of a benevolent, omnipotent creator. So while the story of a homesick queen is a beautiful human tale, the deeper truth is likely more calculated and more magnificent. The gardens were a statement written in soil, stone, and flowing water, declaring that the king's authority was as fundamental and life-sustaining as nature itself. And that makes their eventual fate not just an archaeological mystery, but a poignant lesson in the fragility of even the most towering symbols of power. That fragile, water-fed equilibrium could not last forever. The Hanging Gardens, whether in Babylon or Nineveh, were a masterpiece of sustained effort, and their end was likely not a single cataclysmic event but a slow unraveling. The first and most profound cause was simply the collapse of the empire that built them. If the gardens were in Nineveh, their fate is tragically clear. In 612 before the Common Era, a coalition of Babylonians and Medes sacked the Assyrian capital. They razed Sennacherib's glorious city to the ground. The palace was burned, the libraries scattered. The sophisticated aqueduct system, that 50-mile lifeline from the mountains, would have been a prime military target, deliberately breached to cripple the city. Without the engineers to maintain it and the royal authority to command the labor, the great waterworks fell silent, the bronze screws seized with rust. The sluice gates rotted, the terraces, deprived of their constant, life-giving flow, would have withered in a single season. The deep soil baked hard in the sun, and the imported trees, those cedars and cypresses, died where they stood. Within a few decades, the artificial mountain became a barren, crumbling mud hill, slowly melting back into the landscape it once defied. If the gardens were in Babylon, a similar process of neglect followed the city's own decline after its conquest by the Persian Empire in 539 before the Common Era. While Babylon remained an important city, the obsessive royal-level maintenance required for such a fantastical project would have faded. Later Persian and Greek rulers had their own capitals and their own projects. The gardens became an expensive relic, a drain on resources with no political payoff for new kings. The specialized gardeners would have been reassigned, the oxen sold, and the machinery left to decay. The water, once so meticulously guided, would have found new paths, seeping destructively into the foundations it was meant to avoid, accelerating the collapse. Then came the Earth itself. This region sits on a web of active fault lines. Earthquakes are not rare events here, they are a recurring geological fact. A major tremor would have been catastrophic for a structure already weakened by neglect. Those carefully balanced vaults supporting the immense weight of soil would have been vulnerable to shearing forces. A single violent shift could have collapsed entire sections of the terraces, causing a catastrophic landslide of mud and stone. An earthquake could also have shattered the delicate water infrastructure instantly, snapping aqueduct channels and burying the intricate network of lead-lined conduits under tons of rubble. Even without a quake, the gardens carried the seeds of their own destruction. The very element that gave them life, water, was also a relentless agent of decay. Constant moisture, even with waterproofing, would have slowly seeped into the mud brick and mortar. In winter, this moisture could freeze and expand, cracking stone and popping bricks from their settings. In the heat, salts dissolved in the water would be drawn to the surface of the bricks, crystallizing and crumbling them from within. It was a slow, silent war of attrition that no human maintenance could ultimately win forever. This leads to the final, haunting reason for their disappearance. They were made of the wrong stuff to last. Unlike the Great Pyramid of stone at Giza, a garden is an organic entity. When a pyramid is abandoned, its stone blocks remain, a skeleton waiting to be found. When a garden is abandoned, it simply dies and returns to the earth. The trees rot, the soil erodes, the wooden machinery disintegrates. The lead sheeting would have been scavenged for other uses. The beautiful stone reliefs depicting the gardens could survive in a museum, but the garden itself leaves only ghosts, subtle variations in soil composition, strange patterns of drainage, and ambiguous foundations that archaeologists struggle to interpret. The wonder did not so much vanish as it dissolved, its essence leaching back into the very landscape it was built to conquer. One day, the last gardener left his post. The last oxen stopped turning the screw, the last channel ran dry, and the mountain, having forgotten how to be a mountain, began the long, quiet process of becoming dust. The silence of the written record sent archaeologists into the earth, seeking answers with shovel and trowel. The most famous of these seekers was a German archaeologist named Robert Koldewey. In 1899, he arrived at the immense mounds that marked the ruins of Babylon, armed with a conviction that the city of legend could be mapped and understood. For over a decade, his team worked meticulously, unearthing the grandeur of Nebuchadnezzar's capital. They uncovered the blue-glazed bricks of the Ishtar Gate, traced the path of the processional way, and excavated the foundations of the Grand Palace complex. It was here, in the palace's northeastern corner, that Koldewey believed he found his prize. He uncovered a remarkable subterranean structure, a series of 14 long, vaulted chambers built with unusually thick walls of baked brick. Nearby, he found the remains of a deep, three-shafted well with a curious chain pump mechanism, a clear sign of an ambitious water-lifting system. To Koldewey, the puzzle pieces fit. The vaults could have supported the immense weight of a garden terrace, and the well provided the water. He announced to the world that he had discovered the foundation of the hanging gardens. For a time, the mystery seemed solved, but as other scholars examined his findings, doubts grew. The vaulted chambers, while impressive, were partly underground and seemed more likely to be used for storage, perhaps even as a royal treasury or magazine. The location, tucked in a corner of the palace, felt wrong for a wonder meant to inspire awe, with limited space for the sprawling terraces described by ancient writers. Most damningly, no trace of the garden itself was found, no unusual soil layers rich in decomposed plant matter, no network of irrigation channels leading from the well to the supposed garden beds. Koldewey had found impressive Babylonian engineering, but not the definitive fingerprint of a paradise. His discovery was a tantalizing maybe, a plausible candidate that ultimately raised more questions than it answered. In the century since, other expeditions have scoured the site using more advanced technology, from ground-penetrating radar to soil analysis. They have mapped the entire city in exquisite detail, yet the signature of the gardens remains elusive. No vast stone terraces, no lead-lined reservoirs, no botanical evidence has emerged from the Babylonian soil. This absence is a powerful form of evidence in itself. In archaeology, not finding something you expect to find is a result. it forces a re-evaluation of the basic premise. The consistent negative evidence from Babylon has been the single strongest argument for those like Dr. Daly, who argue we have been digging in the wrong city entirely. This shifted the quest northward to the ruins of Nineveh near modern-day Mosul. Here, the search faces different but equally formidable challenges. The site has suffered from centuries of looting, modern urban sprawl, and tragic conflict, making large-scale, systematic excavation incredibly difficult. Yet the clues on the surface are compelling. The remains of Sennacherib's great aqueduct at Jerwan stand as silent, physical proof of his hydraulic ambition. Satellite imagery and surveys have revealed the vast scale of his water system, a network designed to feed the city and, plausibly, a spectacular royal garden. Stone reliefs from his palace, now in museums, provide a visual blueprint of a lush, terraced garden watered by an aqueduct, a picture that matches the ancient descriptions. But the garden site itself, likely on the steep slopes near his palace, has never been conclusively identified or fully excavated. The evidence is circumstantial, a powerful collection of means and motive without the final, smoking gun of a foundation stone inscribed, "Here grew the garden." This is the profound frustration and the essential honesty of archaeology. It deals in fragments and shadows in the slow, careful accumulation of context. A single piece of inscriptional evidence, a tablet naming the garden's location, could settle the debate overnight. Yet that tablet may have crumbled to dust 2,000 years ago, or it may lie undiscovered beneath a modern street. The quest for the hanging gardens teaches us that some of history's greatest wonders are defined not by what we can hold in our hands, but by the enduring power of an idea, a story so magnificent that we have spent centuries trying to prove it was real. And if the physical proof forever eludes us, where does that leave the legend itself? The written word holds its secrets in the shape of a wedge. For over a century, scholars accepted the Greek account of the hanging gardens in Babylon because it was the only detailed story they had. The Babylonian silence was a mystery, but not one that prompted a radical rethink until linguists began to look at the clay tablets with new questions. The breakthrough came not from digging in the dirt, but from meticulously re-examining the ancient script pressed into it, cuneiform. This is where Dr. Stephanie Daly's work becomes so compelling. She didn't search for a new tablet, she looked at old ones with fresh eyes, particularly the royal inscriptions of King Sennacherib of Assyria. These texts, carved on stone prisms and palace walls, were well known for boasting of his military campaigns and building projects. But within these grandiose proclamations, Daly identified passages that earlier translators had interpreted differently. She focused on the technical descriptions of his engineering feats at Nineveh. One key passage described his creation of a wonder for all peoples, a garden, and the technology used to water it. Previous translations had used generic terms for water-lifting devices. Daly, drawing on a deep understanding of Akkadian vocabulary and Mesopotamian technology, argued that a specific phrase was best translated as a screw of bronze. This wasn't just a bucket or a shaduf, it was a machine, a helical device capable of moving large volumes of water efficiently. This matched the later Greek descriptions perfectly, yet it was written a century before the Greeks credited Archimedes with the invention. Furthermore, Sennacherib's texts detailed the entire hydraulic system with pride, mentioning the long-distance canals, the reshaping of the hillside with terraces, and the collection of rare trees and plants from across his empire. The king speaks of this garden not as a private retreat, but as a central, crowning achievement of his reign, a symbol of his divine-given power to manipulate nature itself. Now contrast this with the mountain of texts from Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. His building inscriptions are exhaustive. We can read lists of the cedars imported from Lebanon for his palace roof, the precise measurements of the city walls, and the rituals performed for the Ishtar Gate. He records the digging of canals for irrigation and city supply. If he had built the monumental world wonder gardens described by the Greeks, it would have been the single most expensive and complex project of his reign. It would have required boasting of its own, and yet, across thousands of administrative records and royal monuments, there is a void. No mention of building stone terraces for a garden, no procurement of special screws or lead for waterproofing, no lists of exotic plants for a pleasure mount. The silence is specific and profound. It suggests the later Greek writers, hearing tales of an astonishing Eastern garden, simply attached it to the most famous ruined city they knew. The real location had been lost in the fog of war and time, but the description of the technology and the scale survived, a ghost story that drifted south and attached itself to the wrong king. This is how historical secrets hide, not always in lost tombs, but in plain sight within a language few can read, waiting for someone to ask a different question of the same old marks in the clay. The cuneiform clue doesn't just point to a different city, it reveals how easily a magnificent truth can be separated from its origin, becoming a legend in search of a home. The aqueduct at Jerwan is a ghost of water and stone. Stretching over 300 meters across a valley, its skeletal remains are the single most compelling physical argument for the hanging gardens of Nineveh. Built by Sennacherib's engineers, this was not a simple canal. It was a raised, monumental water bridge constructed from more than 2 million precisely cut limestone blocks, designed to carry a river across the air. Its purpose was to complete a 50-mile system that channeled fresh water from mountain springs directly to the heart of the capital. The scale is almost incomprehensible. This was an infrastructure project of a modern mindset, a public works endeavor that declared the king's power could reshape geography itself to serve his city. For a garden, water is the first and final requirement. Babylon relied on the Euphrates at its doorstep, a ready source but one that sat at the bottom of the plain. Lifting that water 75 feet straight up day after day was a problem of immense energy, but Nineveh, with its aqueducts, solved the problem of lift before the water even reached the city. The system brought water from the mountains at a high elevation, meaning it arrived in Nineveh with potential energy, with pressure and height already built into its journey. From a high-holding reservoir in the city, feeding a complex garden on a terraced hillside becomes an engineering challenge of distribution and control, not of sheer, brute force elevation. Think of the difference between trying to fill a swimming pool on your roof using only buckets carried up a ladder versus having a municipal water tower already feeding your neighborhood. The first is an exhausting, small-scale struggle. The second enables scale and permanence. The Jerwan aqueduct proves Sennacherib's civilization thought in terms of the second option. They engineered water to come to them on their terms at their command. The ruins show a sophistication that matches the ancient descriptions of the garden's machinery. The channel was lined with waterproof cement, and the structure itself incorporated subtle arches to distribute weight, a testament to a deep understanding of hydraulics and load-bearing physics. This was not a culture that would struggle to water a rooftop herb garden. This was a culture that moved rivers. So when we ask whether a king could build a hanging garden, we must look at his kingdom's hydraulic resume. Babylon's resume shows brilliant irrigation for flat farmland. Nineveh's, etched in stone at Jerwan, shows a mastery of pressurized, long-distance water delivery for monumental urban display. One makes a garden possible, the other makes a wonder plausible. The stones of Jerwan are silent, but their message is thunderous. They tell us that in the hills of Assyria, the dream of a paradise garden was not a fantasy, but the logical culmination of an empire's greatest engineering triumph. And if they could build a river in the sky, what was a mountain of trees to them? Stone from a palace wall gives us our only possible eyewitness view. In the British Museum, a relief carved for King Sennacherib's palace at Nineveh shows a detailed garden scene. A terraced hillside rises in distinct levels, each crowded with trees, vines, and orderly rows of what appear to be date palms. A grand aqueduct marches along the base, and a pavilion sits at the summit. It is not labeled Hanging Gardens of Babylon, but it matches the ancient descriptions with an uncanny precision. This is not a fantasy, it is a royal record, a snapshot of an actual engineered landscape meant to proclaim the king's control over nature. The art is factual, celebratory, and rooted in a specific place and achievement. Then, for over 1,000 years, the visual record goes dark. When the gardens reappear in art, they are no longer Assyrian. They have fully transformed into the Babylonian legend. Renaissance painters, armed with biblical and classical texts but no archaeological knowledge, let their imagination soar. Their canvases show impossible, gravity-defying structures, often resembling the stepped towers of Italian villas or the hanging vineyards of the Mediterranean, transplanted onto a vague Eastern backdrop. The gardens become a symbol of antique luxury and lost knowledge, filtered through a European lens that valued allegory over accuracy. By the 19th century, the age of excavation and empire brought a new kind of image. Detailed engravings in popular books attempted a scholarly reconstruction, but they were still guesses. They often depicted massive, classical stone arches supporting lush terraces, a fusion of Roman aqueduct technology and Victorian greenhouse aesthetics. These images were persuasive, cementing a specific, grandiose vision in the public mind that later archaeologists like Coldwell would desperately try to find in the dirt. Today, we have entered the age of digital dreaming. Computer-generated reconstructions use the latest archaeological data to build breathtaking virtual models. We can fly over a digitally resurrected Babylon, watching sunlight dapple through the leaves of a garden that may never have been there. Or we can explore a meticulously textured Nineveh with water flowing from its aqueduct into terraced groves. These modern images are seductive in their detail, giving the legend a sheen of scientific truth. Yet even they are interpretations built on layers of assumption and debate. Each era's technology and cultural bias shaped the vision. The Assyrian relief showed a statement of power. The Renaissance painting showed a moral lesson on hubris and beauty. The Victorian engraving showed an engineering puzzle to be solved. The CGI reconstruction shows a mystery we still hope to crack. This visual journey reveals something profound. The Hanging Gardens are less a fixed place in history and more a mirror. They reflect whatever a culture needs them to be, a canvas for our changing ideas of paradise, power, and the past. We keep painting them, rebuilding them in pixels and paint, because the idea of a lost wonder is somehow more enduring and more human than any pile of stones we might actually find. But into this tale of kings and engineers, a queen from legend strides, sword in hand. Her name was Semiramis, and her story is a whirlwind of myth, war, and impossible construction. In later Greek and Roman tales, she was no homesick princess, but a formidable Assyrian ruler who supposedly built Babylon and its wonders, including the Hanging Gardens, as monuments to her own glory. Ancient writers described her as a warrior queen of unmatched beauty and cunning who led armies, founded cities, and whose ambitions shaped the world. Dramatic artwork from later centuries captures this vision, showing a powerful figure commanding builders or surveying her domain, often with the tiered gardens rising behind her. Yet, as with so much of this story, the historical truth dissolves upon closer look. There is no reliable Assyrian or Babylonian record of a Queen Semiramis who built Babylon. Scholars believe the legend may be a distant, fantastical echo of a real Assyrian queen named Sammu-rammat, who served as regent for her young son in the 8th century before the Common Era. She was notable, yes, but her historical footprint is a faint shadow compared to the colossal myth that grew around the name Semiramis. So how did this legendary warrior queen become the builder of the Hanging Gardens? The answer lies in the ancient practice of attribution. over centuries, as stories traveled and changed hands, great and inexplicable monuments needed great and legendary founders. The gardens were so astonishing that crediting them to a normal king felt insufficient. They demanded a founder of mythic proportions. The powerful, semi-divine figure of Semiramis, already linked to Babylon in folklore, was a perfect fit. Her legend absorbed the wonder, adding a new layer of epic drama to its origins. This entanglement is a perfect example of how ancient mysteries gather folklore like a rolling snowball. First, a real engineering achievement, perhaps in Nineveh, inspires awe. Then, as memory fades and the city falls, the story detaches and drifts. It attaches itself to a more famous city, Babylon. It gets a romantic motive, a homesick queen, and finally, when that seems too ordinary, it gets a mythical founder, a superhuman queen who could command the impossible. Each layer makes the core wonder more magical, but also obscures its true history a little more. Semiramis did not build the gardens, but her legend built their fame. She represents the moment a historical puzzle becomes a timeless myth, where the need for a story outweighs the need for facts. And it begs the question, what do we lose when we replace the complex human truth of engineers and kings with the simpler, grander tale of a goddess queen? Perhaps we lose the very thing that makes the real achievement so wondrous, that it was done by human hands at all. The Euphrates River flows through a land of dust and heat. To understand the feasibility of the gardens, we must move beyond texts and tablets and ask a fundamental question of the earth itself. Could the environment of Babylon, with its specific climate and water sources, have physically supported such a water-hungry wonder? Modern climatology and hydrology provide a stark scientific lens. Babylon sat and still sits in a region of extreme aridity. Annual rainfall averages less than 6 inches, falling mostly in brief, unreliable winter bursts. For most of the year, the sun is relentless and evaporation rates are extraordinarily high. This means the land cannot rely on sky water. It is entirely dependent on river water. The Euphrates was its lifeline, a broad, slow-moving stream that provided irrigation for agriculture and drinking water for the city. But a garden of the scale described is not a field of barley. It is an artificial forest. A single mature tree on a hot day can transpire hundreds of gallons of water. Multiply that by hundreds of trees across multiple terraces, and factor in the evaporation from open channels and waterfalls, and the daily water requirement becomes astronomical. Some estimates suggest the gardens would have needed thousands upon thousands of gallons every single day just to stay alive. Now picture the engineering challenge. That water had to come from the Euphrates, which flowed at the base level of the city. To reach the top of a 75-foot garden, it had to be lifted. Not once, but continuously in a massive, unending cycle. The energy required to do this with ancient technology is almost unimaginable. You would need an army of laborers or oxen working in shifts, 24 hours a day, operating banks of screws or shafts on an industrial scale. The system would be a marvel in itself, a sprawling, noisy, smoky engine of leather, wood, and bronze, demanding constant maintenance and a vast logistical tale of supervisors, animal handlers, and repair craftsmen. And here, the scientific analysis meets the historical silence. Such an immense and perpetual machine would have been the largest industrial project in the city. It would have consumed a significant portion of the state's resources and manpower. Yet, in all of Babylon's meticulous records of rations, labor gangs, and material deliveries, there is no administrative trace of this perpetual motion machine. No orders for the bronze for 100 screws, no requisitions for the timber for 1,000 shaduf arms, no payroll for the permanent crew of the garden lift. The environmental demand creates an engineering requirement, and that requirement leaves no paper trail. It is an absence that speaks volumes. Now, shift the map north to the Assyrian heartland around Nineveh. The environmental picture changes. This region, while still dry, receives nearly double the rainfall of Babylon. The Tigris River runs swifter, and crucially, the land is not flat. The hills provided gravitational advantage, but the real game changer was human engineering. The aqueduct system, like the one at Jerwan, did not just bring water, it brought water with potential energy. It delivered mountain water at an elevation higher than the city. This transforms the hydrological equation. Instead of fighting gravity to lift every drop from a low river, Assyrian engineers could use gravity to their advantage. They could channel pre-elevated water into a high reservoir within the city, and from there distribute it down through terraced gardens with a network of sluices and channels. The lift problem is minimized, reduced to perhaps fine-tuning the flow between levels. The water source itself is also more pristine and reliable than the silt-laden Euphrates, better for delicate plants. An animated map of the region makes this vivid. Over Babylon, you see a small, isolated circle of extreme aridity, with a single blue river line snaking through. The data shows high evaporation, low rainfall, and a massive hydraulic lift required for any major garden. Over Nineveh, the rainfall zone is larger. The river network is more complex with tributaries from the mountains, and most importantly, you see blue lines not just of rivers, but of man-made aqueducts stretching from the hills to the city, a web of engineered water. The environment did not make the hanging gardens impossible in Babylon, but it made them exponentially more difficult, more expensive, and more logically demanding of a vast, unattested infrastructure. In Assyria, the environment presented a challenge that their existing, proven technology was already built to meet. So we are left with a choice between two scenarios. 1. A city in a desert building the ancient world's most ambitious and energy-intensive hydroponic project without leaving a single record of how they powered it. Or 2. A city in a slightly kinder climate using its proven, monumental aqueduct technology to create a garden that was the crowning display of that very system. Science does not tell us which story is true, but it clearly tells us which one the land itself was ready to believe. That silent, crumbling dust gave rise to a forest of stories. Long after the last brick of Babylon or Nineveh fell, the hanging gardens took root in a far more fertile soil, the human imagination. They escaped the confines of archaeology to become a powerful, recurring symbol in our art and dreams. The poet Antipater of Sidon, who first listed the 7 wonders, did not just describe the gardens, he rhapsodized about them, writing of their high-roofed park and the climbing plants that hung from towering trees. This was not a dry historical account, it was all put into verse, setting a tone that would echo for millennia. The gardens became a shorthand for paradise lost, for impossible beauty conjured by human will. They appear in medieval Persian poetry as a vision of divine order, and centuries later, they inspire romantic poets who saw in them the sublime struggle of nature against human artifice. This symbolic power made them irresistible to modern creators. In video games, they are a coveted prize or a breathtaking level, a tiered labyrinth of puzzles and secrets where players can literally walk through the legend. Blockbuster films use them as a backdrop for epic romance or grand adventure, their verdant terraces offering a visual feast that screams ancient luxury and mystery. Whenever a story needs a setting that represents ultimate achievement, a utopia built against all odds, or the pinnacle of a fallen civilization's genius, the hanging gardens are the go-to reference. They are more visually adaptable than the massive tomb of Mausolus or the towering statue of Rhodes. A garden is alive. It is a place you can imagine walking through, smelling the flowers and feeling the cool spray from its waterfalls. This tangible sensory quality makes them uniquely accessible. But why does this particular wonder, one that might never have existed where we thought, hold such a powerful grip on us? Perhaps because it is the most human of the marvels. The Great Pyramid is a monument to death and eternity. The statue of Zeus is a depiction of divine majesty. The hanging gardens, in contrast, were a celebration of life itself. They were built for pleasure, for love, for solace, or for prideful display, motives we understand intimately. They represent not just power, but the application of that power to create beauty and respite. In a world that often feels chaotic and harsh, the idea of a sanctuary built high above the troubles of the earth, a deliberate, watered paradise, is eternally compelling. It speaks to a deep, shared longing. So while the stones may be silent and the location debated, the garden itself is in full, eternal bloom, cultivated not by Babylonian engineers, but by every generation that hears the story and feels that spark of wonder. The true legacy of the hanging gardens is not in the ground, but in our persistent need to believe that such a place could have been real. A new kind of explorer now searches from the silent vacuum of space. The quest for the hanging gardens has entered the 21st century, where archaeologists no longer rely solely on shovels, but on satellites and radar waves that can see through the Earth itself. This is the realm of satellite archaeology and ground-penetrating radar, technologies that are quietly reopening the cold case of this ancient wonder. It begins with eyes in the sky, specifically with declassified photographs from a once secret American spy satellite program called Corona. These black and white images were taken in the 1960s and 70s, and they hold a unique power. They captured the landscape of the Middle East before the massive urban expansion and modern agriculture that have since altered or buried countless ancient sites. By studying these high-resolution photos, researchers can spot subtle discolorations in the soil, faint geometric shadows, and lines invisible from the ground. These are called crop marks or soil marks, and they reveal the ghostly outlines of long-buried walls, roads, and foundations. A buried stone wall, for instance, affects how plants grow above it, creating a line of stunted vegetation. An ancient filled-in ditch might hold more moisture, promoting lusher growth. From hundreds of miles in orbit, these patterns form a cryptic map of lost cities. For both Babylon and Nineveh, analysts have pored over these images, searching for any large, anomalous rectangular or tiered structure that doesn't match known buildings. They look for the signature of a massive, isolated foundation that could have supported the garden's weight. While no definitive hanging gardens complex has been pinpointed from space, this technology has been invaluable for mapping the full extent of ancient water systems, like the canals leading to Nineveh, providing context for where a grand garden might have logically been placed. But to peer beneath the surface, to hunt for those hidden vaults and water channels, science turns to a different tool. Imagine a machine that sends harmless pulses of radar energy into the ground, listening for their echoes. This is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. An operator pushes a unit that looks like a lawnmower across a field. The radar waves penetrate the soil and bounce back whenever they hit a change in density, a buried wall, a cavity, or a layer of different material. These returning signals are compiled by a computer to create a cross-sectional image, a vertical slice of the Earth that looks like a messy, gray-scale sonogram. On a simulated scan over a site map of Babylon, you might see a chaotic jumble of signals from centuries of rebuilding and collapse, but an experienced interpreter is looking for order in that chaos. They search for the distinct, repeating arch patterns of vaulted chambers or the straight, linear signatures of stone conduits. They look for deep, uniform layers that could indicate the imported soil of a garden terrace sitting atop a man-made foundation. A clear GPR signature of a large, subterranean vaulted structure in the right location could be the smoking gun, the hidden skeleton of the garden support system. At Nineveh, the hope is that GPR surveys on the terraced slopes near Sennacherib's palace might reveal the engineered underpinnings of a grand garden, perhaps even tracing the path of a lead-lined water channel leading from the known aqueduct system. The promise of this technology is profound. It allows for non-invasive exploration, letting archaeologists see into the past without disturbing a single stone. It can survey vast areas quickly, narrowing down the most promising spots for traditional excavation. For a mystery as elusive as the Hanging Gardens, this is a game changer. It means the definitive evidence we have sought for centuries, the architectural blueprint of the wonder itself, might not be buried too deep, but simply invisible to our eyes, waiting to be revealed by a machine that listens to the whispers of the earth. Yet, even these brilliant tools face the relentless enemy of time. The very materials the gardens were made from may have left no trace for radar to find, their echoes lost forever in the dust. The relentless search for proof, from clay tablets to satellite scans, reveals something deeper than historical curiosity. We are not just hunting for ruins, we are searching for a reflection of ourselves. The legend of the Hanging Gardens endures with such power because it speaks to fundamental human desires that transcend archaeology. It is a story about our capacity to dream the impossible and then build it. At its core, the garden represents ingenuity, that brilliant spark that looks at a desert and sees not a limitation, but a canvas. It is the same drive that pushes us to send probes to Mars or dive to the deepest ocean trenches, the refusal to accept the boundaries nature sets. The gardens symbolize our ancient, stubborn belief that with enough will and cleverness, we can reshape our world into a place of beauty and abundance. Then there is the romantic heart of the tale, the king building a paradise for his homesick queen. This transforms the wonder from a cold feat of engineering into a monument of devotion. It is a story about love made tangible, about using immense power not for conquest but for comfort. In a world often defined by conflict and hardship, this narrative offers a pure, aspirational motive. It suggests that even the most powerful rulers are driven by the same simple, human emotions that we all feel, the desire to heal a loved one's sadness. This makes the gardens feel personal, relatable, and deeply noble. Finally, they embody the ultimate triumph of life over a harsh environment. A lush green mountain rising from a flat, arid plain is the most vivid metaphor for hope conceivable. It is life defiantly insisting on itself, a declaration that even in the most unforgiving circumstances, beauty and growth are possible. This resonates on a primal level. It is the story of every garden ever planted, of every civilization that coaxed food from dry soil, amplified to a mythical scale. So we must ask, what if the physical proof forever eludes us? Does that make the gardens any less real? In a way, the legend itself has become a different kind of wonder, one built not from stone and soil, but from stories and human need. Its persistence in our collective imagination for over 2,000 years is its own evidence of a profound truth. We keep searching for the gardens because we need to believe that the qualities they represent, our ingenuity, our capacity for devotion, our defiant hope, are real and have always been part of us. The mystery, therefore, is not just about finding a lost location. It is about confirming a piece of our own potential. Perhaps the greatest secret of the Hanging Gardens is that they exist most perfectly not in the ground, but in the timeless landscape of what we believe humanity can be. Yet for all the compelling evidence pointing to Nineveh, a third and more radical school of thought insists we are all chasing a mirage. These scholars, the staunch skeptics, argue that the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were not a misplaced wonder, but a pure invention, a beautiful fiction spun from whole cloth by Greek historians centuries after the fact. Their case is built on a foundation of profound absence. They point out that not a single contemporary Babylonian text, image, or administrative record mentions the gardens. For a civilization that documented everything from the price of barley to the dimensions of temple gates, this silence is not just puzzling, it is definitive. How could the single greatest engineering project of its age, a project requiring a permanent army of laborers and a revolutionary water system, leave not a single footprint in its own homeland's vast archive? To the skeptics, the answer is simple. It never happened. They propose that later Greek and Roman writers traveling through a conquered and ruined Mesopotamia heard tales of the region's past grandeur. They saw the massive, stepped structures of ziggurats, which some have argued could have been planted with trees on their terraces. They encountered the sophisticated Persian pleasure gardens, the walled paradisos, with their orderly rows of trees and clever irrigation. In the minds of these classical authors, separated by time, language, and culture, these elements fused. The imposing, tiered shape of the ziggurat merged with the lush, watered beauty of the Persian garden, and a new, hybrid wonder was born in the imagination. It was then conveniently attributed to the most famous Eastern city they knew, Babylon, and given a romantic backstory to explain its existence. In this view, the Hanging Gardens are not a historical puzzle to be solved, but a literary archetype, a symbol of Oriental luxury, an impossible achievement that fulfilled the Greek and Roman appetite for tales of the exotic East. The detailed descriptions by writers like Diodorus and Strabo are not faulty reports of a real place, but elaborate exercises in ekphrasis, a literary technique of vividly describing a work of art. They were describing a concept, not a location. This theory forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. What if our entire search, from Coldwell's excavations to Daly's linguistic analysis, is an attempt to pin down a phantom, to find the real-world anchor for a story that was always meant to be a metaphor? The debate, therefore, is not just about where the gardens were, but what they fundamentally were. Were they a physical marvel of engineering, or were they a marvel of the human imagination, a story so powerful it demanded to be believed as history? This skeptical view doesn't diminish the legend, it transforms it into a different kind of truth, one written not in clay, but in the enduring power of a perfect idea. The debate over their existence forces us to ask a more important question. What does the sheer ambition of the Hanging Gardens, real or imagined, reveal about the ancient mind? The concept itself is a blueprint of staggering sophistication. To even envision a tiered, watered mountain in a desert required a deep, working knowledge of three separate sciences: hydraulics, architecture, and botany, integrated into a single, living system. This tells us that the engineers of Mesopotamia were not just builders, they were systems thinkers. They understood that a garden is not merely plants in soil, but a delicate balance of weight, flow, and life. The detailed Greek descriptions, whether based on a real site in Nineveh or a composite of wonders, did not emerge from a vacuum. They reflect a technological reality that was plausible to audiences familiar with Eastern achievements. The described screw mechanism, the vaulted foundations, the lead-line channels, these were not magical inventions. They were exaggerations of real, observable technologies that travelers would have seen in use on a smaller scale across the region. This pushes us to dramatically re-evaluate the technological ceiling of these civilizations. We often marvel at Roman aqueducts, and rightly so. Those stone waterways marching across valleys are testaments to imperial scale and precision. But the ambition behind the Hanging Gardens represents a different, and in some ways more complex, kind of engineering. A Roman aqueduct is a linear system, a gravity-fed highway for water. The garden described is a closed-loop ecosystem. It required lifting water against gravity, distributing it in a controlled cascade across multiple levels, managing drainage to prevent structural collapse, and maintaining a specific microclimate for fragile plants. It is hydraulic engineering married to structural engineering and applied horticulture. Think of it as the difference between building a major highway and designing an entire, self-sustaining city from scratch. One is a monumental task, the other is a symphony of interconnected systems. The fact that such a symphony was conceived, whether it was fully built or not, indicates a civilization that was thinking centuries ahead of its time. It shows they were asking what-if questions that stretched their known capabilities to the limit. The legend, therefore, is a fossilized imprint of ancient ambition. It is a clue that their lost technical manuals, their conversations among master builders, contained ideas far more advanced than the ruins alone suggest. The gardens challenge our modern tendency to see the ancient world as primitive. They stand as a reminder that innovation is not a straight line, and that brilliance in one era can be so complete, so astonishing, that later ages mistake it for myth. The biggest questions still hang in the air, unresolved. Where exactly were they? Who truly built them? And what was their final physical fate? These are not minor details, they are the core of the mystery. The debate between Babylon and Nineveh remains fierce, with passionate scholars on each side, armed with textual analysis and environmental data. The identity of the builder is equally contested, a choice between the documented hydraulic genius of Sennacherib and the romantic, powerful legacy of Nebuchadnezzar. As for their end, we can only speculate about a slow death by neglect or a sudden collapse by earthquake, a vanishing act so complete it fuels the legend. This is not a closed case. In universities and research institutes from Oxford to Mosul, the work continues. Archaeologists are now using advanced technologies like LiDAR, which can map ground surfaces through dense vegetation, and multispectral imaging, which can detect chemical changes in the soil caused by ancient human activity. Philologists are still re-examining fragments of cuneiform tablets, hoping for that one overlooked phrase that changes everything. Each season of excavation, each new scan of a satellite image holds the potential for a breakthrough. The story of the Hanging Gardens teaches us that history is not a solved puzzle sitting on a shelf. It is a living, breathing conversation, an ongoing argument across centuries. New evidence can and does emerge from the most unexpected places: a farmer's plow turning up a strange stone, a museum basement yielding a mislabeled tablet. The past is never truly finished with us, so the next time you see an image of those lush, impossible terraces, remember you are not looking at a settled fact. You are looking at a question, an invitation to wonder that has endured for more than 2,000 years, and the answer may still be waiting, buried, for someone to find it. So the final secret of the Hanging Gardens may be that they never truly belonged to a single place. We have traced their story from the romantic Greek accounts to the silent Babylonian tablets, from the vaulted chambers of a German archaeologist's hope to the stone aqueducts of an Assyrian king's pride. We have wrestled with the physics of lifting water and the botany of transplanting forests, all to answer a simple question that has no simple answer. The conflicting accounts, the engineering puzzles, the fierce debate between Babylon and Nineveh, they all lead us to the same profound realization. This wonder's greatest power lies not in its physical reality, but in its relentless hold on our imagination. Whether it was built by Sennacherib as a display of terrifying power, by Nebuchadnezzar as a gesture of profound love, or was a beautiful fiction woven from travelers' tales, the legend itself is a monument. It is a testament to that ancient, stubborn spark of human creativity that looks at a desert and dreams of a mountain, that hears a story of impossible beauty and refuses to let it go. The Hanging Gardens, in the end, are a wonder of the mind as much as of stone. They challenge us to wonder what we are truly capable of, and to remember that the most enduring legacies are often those we build from ideas. So now we turn the question to you. After this journey through the evidence, which theory feels most convincing? Do you believe the gardens bloomed in Babylon, flourished in Nineveh, or were born in the stories of those who came after? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed unraveling this historical mystery with us, subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten corners of our past.